Hello and welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. My name is Maddie, Kendra Nilsson's COO, and today you'll be listening to episode 222, Breaking Free from Perfectionism, A Parent's Guide to Progress with Monica Packer. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, Monica Packer, here with us. I'm super excited to have her on the show. Thank you for being here, Monica.
So glad to be here.
Let me share a little bit about your background, and then if you could fill in some of the blanks for us. So Monica Packer is a top-rated podcaster and coach who guides women towards sustainable growth by embracing progress over perfection. She's a former teacher and mother of 5 and hosts the About Progress podcast and offers coaching services. She also enjoys making cookie dough, which I love, and exploring gardening with her family. And you can check out her podcast probably on all the platforms, right?
We're everywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that and your journey and who you are.
I think our main topic today is pretty connected to why I started the podcast, which was to overcome my own perfectionistic tendencies that were making me stuck on the sidelines of my life, and how I wanted to learn how to do things messy, to be okay with failure, to not have big outcomes, in pursuit of also having bigger change and big outcomes over time. And that all came about because I had a great therapist. Speaking of which, someone like you who was so good at calling it out like it is. And she told me I was a perfectionist. And I didn't believe her at first because I was like, I don't do anything. I used to be this big go-getter, type A everything, very diligent on all things habits, like just extremely the overachieving style of perfectionist that when I crashed and burned in my early 20s, and as part of that had to do some major mental healing, thanks to what perfectionism cost for me, I then became the underachieving kind. And I paid a price that way too. No matter where I was on the spectrum, these happened to be 10 years apart. As I was approaching 30, I'm like, oh no, I'm still a perfectionist and it's still making me feel depressed and anxious and stuck. And wow, I need to find a different way of doing things. And I wanted to first start by figuring out who I was outside of goals and resolutions, outside of achievements and accolades. And as I dug into figuring out who I was again, with progress being the goal, not perfection, it gradually trickled down to me starting a podcast because I was allowed to be bad at it. And it's been the thing I've stuck with and has changed my life. But it all goes back to the bigger things that have changed my life ultimately, which is finding a new way to grow and to develop myself, to find fulfillment along the way.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And honestly, it aligns so perfectly to so many of the things that I speak to. I'm really excited to have you on the show for a fresh perspective, somebody with different words, different stories, and yet sharing a similar message. So really excited to just hear what you have to share with us today.
It's always good when those universes collide, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I have a brief story that when you're talking about your messy life, like wanting to do something messy, it reminded me of when I was getting my undergrad. I was initially an art major, and it's something that was very therapeutic for me for a long time. And I actually changed my major because I could not be messy. I could not just let go and have fun. I was such a perfectionist that it stopped being fun. And I often think back on that. If I could have been messy and just let my hair down and just been crazy, what that could have looked like. And I'm learning that now too. So I love that I'm not the only one. It's nice to not feel so alone in that.
Yes. If I may, that's one of the reasons why at my almost 30th birthday that I realized, hey, I don't want to live like this anymore. And it's because I looked back on all the things I put down thanks to perfectionism. And I also looked at all the things I never dared to pick up because of that same perfectionism. And like you, I had something that I was really passionate about for a very long time. Throughout my entire childhood through teenage years, I was a dancer. And that requires, just like art, a lot of diligence and exactness and certain body types. And it had been such a joy and a passion for me. But as I was approaching 18, I didn't love dance anymore. I hated it. I avoided dance class, which is something I never had done before because they were so expensive. And it was just you always go to ballet. And then I just gradually realized I had lost my joy of dancing, but it was because of how perfectionism robbed that joy, because I wasn't this prima ballerina, because I didn't make the groups I wanted to in college because I would never go to Ballet West or something like that. I just could only see my weaknesses and how bad I was at certain things or how my body looked, and instead of being me in that place. And one of the weird things that I picked up, I joined a dance troupe locally. And at first it was really difficult because I was even worse than I was. Like all these things I thought I was bad at before were way worse. I felt like I could barely touch my toes at that point. So I had to self-confront a lot about how it was okay that I wasn't this like brilliant dancer anymore. And I had to learn how to lose myself in that messy place of not being good at something and still standing in that place. I have a very clear moment of doing this upward motion with my arms and my feet, just like brushing forward with something. And as I was brushing up and my head was lifted, I felt like this immediate bodily return to myself in ways I hadn't experienced for well over a decade, because it had been 14, 15 years since I had actually danced by that point. And it was such an amazing moment. And it wasn't because I was even good at dancing all of a sudden again. It was because I was allowed to embody something that was so representative of myself and an expression of myself, and allowed to do it in a way that it wasn't perfect, that I was able to experience that wholeness again. That's a dramatic story, but it really wasn't. It was a simple moment. And that's a big part of what my work is to help women come back to those moments and to create more of them in ways that don't demand that you have to always be like attending a dance class or taking time out to do a dance troupe, although those are great too, because it's vital to us as women being who we need to be, being fully present, embodied ourselves, because that's what the world needs. Fully alive, embodied women.
That is very beautiful. So crucial. I'm so glad that you're speaking to that message too. And just visualizing that, almost like this energy release for you when you really came back into your body. I love that. I visualize it. It's just like this being able to return to yourself, let go. It's almost like you graduated to this next level of belief and thinking, like this maturing, this coming to understand yourself better. My daughter is actually a big dancer too. Both of them, they do ballroom dancing. And I very much understand that culture of perfectionism and how it can get very toxic very quickly. And my daughter, when she was younger, she tried out 3 times for the Nutcracker, and 3 times she didn't get in. And it like has your little mama heart, it just breaks it just watching that. Now she kept persisting. And by the 3rd time, I was like, we just celebrated that failure. And I don't even like that word failure, but just like, you are so beautiful. This is amazing that you keep leaning in and doing something that's hard, and just celebrating that success so much more than if she had gone on and done it. And she's still gone on to be a dancer, but recognizing like you can let go of that perfectionism.
And good for you as a mom to celebrate that she's allowed to try and not succeed externally. That is the success.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But so tell me a little bit about this. Like you said, you talk about progress over perfection on your podcast, and you share that with us a little bit. And you spoke about perfectionism in dance. Is there anything else that kind of stands out as this pivotal moment when you started to shift your mindset? Have you arrived here today?
I think becoming this perfectionistic person, again, it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum of people who look the stereotype and people who don't. It's people who are overachieving. It's people who would call themselves lazy. So I think it's good for people to know that right out the gate. Like, you very well could be perfectionist if no matter what you're doing, you feel like you are misplacing who you are on your outcomes, whether you have them or not. And if that sense of self is so tied to those outcomes and so bred by fear, then you are likely moving thanks to perfectionism, some form of it. And since I've been all across that spectrum, I can say that the costs are real, regardless of where you are. But how I got there was not like, hey, I'm going to try to ruin my life by being a perfectionist. It's just like all mental places we find ourselves in. And it started out with good intentions. I was just trying to be a good fill in the blank, good dancer, a good student, a good daughter, a good follower of my faith. And ultimately, all those things wrap up into I was just trying to be a good person. And doing so meant following the prescriptions that I knew to be that type of good person. I think we all have those prescriptions in mind. We all know what it takes to be a good student or to be a good mom or to be an exerciser. Like we all have those prescriptions that you just like, oh, pop, there it is in my head. I know it. So I follow it diligently and then I get to the end and then I'm done. And so that really was it for me. It wasn't like an intentional thing, except for one factor, I would say. In my pursuit to be a good person, I gradually learned, thanks to my overachieving perfectionist tendencies originally, that the world loves a perfectionist. The world loves someone who is going to do it all and to put in the hard work to make other people look good. They love that. They love to celebrate it. They love to aspire to it. It's why we hear people humble brag and call themselves. We know innately that it's something to aspire to. It's rewarded in many ways. The reward is also a prison because the reward is being on a pedestal above other people. And in some ways that feels really good to be looked up to be admired, to be otherworldly and something that people only wish they could be. But a pedestal is an awfully lonely place to be. That pedestal can be because of what you've achieved and what you do. The pedestal can also be like this lone wilderness pedestal that you put yourself on to stay there, stay safe. Don't try anything. Like you will never get there. You won't succeed. You're going to be a failure. Nobody cares. So just stay here. Regardless of where you are and whatever pedestal you lie on with perfectionism, one of the biggest prices you pay are your relationships. And that was true for me when I was the stereotype, and it was true for me when I wasn't. Is the price I paid were my relationships with my loved ones, with my husband, with my kids, with my friends, with my family. I'm thinking about my parents and my siblings, but also with myself. And that's really what I lost along the way. And that was the first step to me really finding a new way was I had to figure out who am I, period. Who am I outside of my successes? Who am I outside of my failures? Who am I outside of the way I look, the way others perceive me as? And figuring that out can be messy, but it honestly is the root of figuring out a way past perfectionism and how it holds you back, how it hurts you, how it creates a barrier between you and the people you love. I think that really is the heart of what has been the best part about trying to heal from perfectionism and find a new way and finding myself is that those relationships are in many ways light years better and healed from my closest family to myself.
Monica, you are speaking to a lot of people in my audience, and not only my audience, like this is like speaking to me, and I really appreciate your authenticity, willingness to share your story. Like you have some great quote-worthy things. I just want to share those again, if that's okay.
Go for it. Maybe I should write these down so I can use them for something.
So I can quote myself. The reward is also a prison. A pedestal is an awful lonely place to be. One of the biggest prices you pay is with your relationships. And then you went on to say, and even with yourself, that relationship with self. And so many of us, like that resonates with us. I'm a recovering perfectionist myself, an overachiever. And honestly, I think a lot of leaders in this world are. Yeah. Maybe even other people, but it's the virtue vice side. It's that spectrum part. We lean too far one side and we're super effective on this other end. And then the other side is very lonely and dark and overwhelming because, man, we are so addicted to those to-do lists, that dopamine hit with doing all these things. And I was actually just in church talking about these very things, about how you get so many great high fives for doing all of this stuff. And yet it's an addiction in itself. And I suddenly have so much more compassion for people that have pornography addictions or alcohol, drug addictions, because they don't get high fives, but they very much have an addiction just like I do. And it's refreshing to hear you say it so clearly. So thank you for sharing some of that story. And
thanks for giving me the space to.
Of course. So in this journey for you, you said it didn't happen overnight, that you figured all of these things out. But how do you get to that space where you don't go back into that
pendulum swing
and seeking for that dopamine hit, those little, oh, check, did it, oh, nailing all this? Do you get to that space, or are you still going on the other end of underachieving? Speak to that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so we talked about perfectionism being a spectrum, but it's also a pendulum swing. Like when you're doing the all side of it, you pay a price, and it often leads to the price being nothing, like you land in the nothing zone. So if people are in that pattern, I think it's really important to step back and to get a lot of clarity on back to that sense of self-peace. Who am I? Period. What do I value? What do I want? What do I need? Even down to Julia Roberts in Runaway Bride. What kind of eggs do I like? Knowing these things are vital to being able to better separate yourself from that pendulum swing that we can get caught on. Because when we know ourselves, we can rise above our own tendencies better. We can ground ourselves back to who we really are when those tendencies creep up, because it is a tendency. Like perfectionism is a tendency, and I have to always be aware of it. We can ground ourselves. We can also persevere in ways that people probably think, wait, aren't you talking about perfectionism means that you shouldn't try anymore? No, that is perfectionism. The opposite of perfectionism isn't stopping. It's moving forward in a different way, where that sense of self is the compass. It's also the anchor. It's the guide. It's what pushes you along so that you try with the expectation that you will also fail, and that you do so with a different type of persistence, because you know the transformation doesn't lie in the outcome. The transformation lies in the process. It's in the doing that you transform. It's in the trying that you change. It's never the outcome.
Can you just repeat all of that again? I couldn't write that fast, but that was amazing.
I don't know if I can. A shorter way of saying it is the transformation lies in the process, not the outcome. And that helps you, again, persevere, to rise above, to not get too cocky when you get somewhere good or you finally get a place that you were wanting to go, to not make it about you as much as maybe you would have been tempted to do if you were navigating from a place of perfectionism, because you are you, period. And the craziest thing about this, Kendra, is that as you believe that the process is what changes me, that's what the point is. The point of everything is just in the trying and the doing, not the outcome. You actually get better outcomes. You're allowed to pivot. You're allowed to tweak. You're allowed to make a different choice as you go. You're allowed to try different things because it's not so personal when things aren't going your way. You're allowed to get help from people like you who are doing this hard work to help people along this path of progress, because you have a different way than maybe they're accustomed to trying. So that's the weird part of the story, is as I allowed for mess and mediocrity and failure to be a part of my path, I have grown exponentially. This is my 10th year of doing this whole experiment. I started the podcast like 11 months in to the experiment. So I have grown exponentially because I've allowed and made room for all of those things. So again, the opposite of perfectionism is apathy. That's not it. It's progress. It's still trying, but doing it from a different place and in different ways.
So beautifully said. So many of those things. When I was thinking of names for my podcast, I kept going back and forth. Fulfillment, progress, but progress has like so many different meanings. So I was like, oh, I don't really know if they'll get it. But yeah, very much passionate about these same things. So you're just speaking my language. I'm like beaming. I'm trying to write it all down really fast. I love what you're saying. I loved how you talked about there was exponential growth when you allowed for that mess, that mediocrity, that failure. Do you have any maybe quick personal examples, maybe recently, maybe a while ago, of how you could lean into that when that was so against your nature?
I'll share one personal and one professional. Personal is, I have 5 kids, as you stated in the beginning. So far, 3 of them have been diagnosed with special needs, but we're pretty sure there's one more. They were like, oh, there's all this and they're coming up. So we'll just see how it goes and what that ends up being, because they're still quite young. Anyway, it's been a lot. It's been a lot of all of these things we just talked about. Do the small things we do actually matter? Is leaning into this process actually what changes us? Because guess what? I want outcomes. I want kids who are doing better. Like, I want things to be better. I want the results. One of my sons, we were working on a lot of big things for him, but we had to do it in the smallest of ways. Like, it was down to a minute by minute strategy. Like, we were just taking it a minute at a time. And one of the ways we were trying to do that was to help him learn how to regulate his nervous system. And this was well before anybody knew that language. Like, when I first heard about it from my amazing counselor after we'd moved 4 or more therapists with him. Anyway, when I first heard about that, I was like, what magic are you talking about? I've never heard of this. Anyway, so we were working on just helping him learn how to regulate his body, because that was a big part of what was creating his behaviors. And it was like it was like climbing Everest. It was like impossible. Like I could not get him to take a deep breath for the life of him. And one of the times that I was trying to work on it with him, that wasn't the only thing we were doing, but it was one of the things. That was a minute by minute thing. Okay. He literally screamed at me, "It's not working." Like eyes bugged out, screaming in my face, "It's not working." And I felt it too. I was like, oh, snap. This is not working. Like, this is not fun. The little things we're trying to do, like, none of it's working. Please, somebody give us like a magic pill, a magic person, like fix this overnight, because it is disrupting our entire lives. But then about a year in, he was having a moment where he was about to have a meltdown, and I saw him take a deep breath all on his own. And I was like, whoa, it was working. We were changing. Things were happening. And now it's several years later and he's a totally different kid, but it's not because he's different. Oh, he changed the ways I wanted him to. No, he's himself now in ways that we were really pushing to. And I remind him of that moment all the time. And I'm sure it's so annoying because it's so good for us to both remember, and anything from like where he's working on grades or friendships or something as deep as mental health. Remember when you thought that the small things you were doing were not helping, and they were the very things that created the change you needed in your life. It's working. You are changing. So that's the personal example. And the professional one, and I know these professional examples don't interest everybody, so I'll keep it brief. I told you I've been podcasting for over 8 years, and you asked before we got on the show if I've always loved it. And I was like, I've actually hated my podcast several times and almost quit many times. Podcasting world, if you're trying to do it for just a business, just for people to know, is a really tough way to try to bring in income for your family. And it's been that way for me, and arguably have one of the top podcasts in the world. But because you're not like a celebrity podcasting about their sitcom, you're probably not going to make big bank off of your show. And anyway, it just got to the point in 2024 where I was like, this show was great. It changed a lot, but I can no longer do it for free. And I can't also do it. I can't pay to do the show anymore, because that's how it had been off and on for several years. Like I paid to do my work. Anyway, so I felt like I wanted to just be done. And it felt so personal. I think anything does. You really worked on something for years really hard. And instead of quitting, I set a deadline to stop. I told myself, just do it for this year. Set a deadline at the end of the year. And if you're still feeling this way, and if things are still looking this way, you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to pivot. You can go a different direction. And during that year, it was stressful still. I'm going to be very honest. It wasn't like, oh, you have a deadline to stop, so just it's going to be fun all along. It was not. I had a lot of self-doubt, a lot of stress, but because I gave myself that space to be there, I was allowed to get curious about different ways to build my podcast. I was allowed to try different things. I was allowed to still call my shots on big guests and all that. So now it's 2025. I obviously didn't quit, but I got to tell you, I still have those options tucked in my back pocket. I still have my plan Bs and plan Cs. And I still know that if I decide to stop tomorrow, it's okay. But because I gave myself that allowance, and I still do, I just aired today the biggest podcast guest I've ever gotten. And I'm just really sitting in that today. I may stop this in a couple months. That could be the case, or maybe it will still go on for maybe I'll be like the Oprah podcast and just be around forever. But regardless, I'm really proud of myself for allowing it to be messy, to have a different kind of persistence, to remove myself from my outcomes, and to know that it was okay, that the outcomes are I wanted it to be, and that I was allowed to do things differently.
Monica, that is so beautiful. And again, so well said. It just speaking to so many of us that really struggle with that. Like it's okay to have a plan B or C, and just being willing to pivot and be flexible, to stay grounded, like really cultivate that patience and that presence. Like those are all key parts, it sounds like, from what I hear you saying in this journey. And it's been difficult to learn that when you just want it to be a certain way and work a certain way. You just want those results. You just want those outcomes, whether it's with your child or professionally, and normalizing it. I love how both stories talked about that, like slowing down, being still, and understanding what it's teaching you. And I feel like that's part of it. It's just normalizing it and recognizing like this is part of the journey. This is okay. It doesn't have to look like this. It can be this. Yeah. And there's beauty in that.
I think even the people who achieve really big things from the outside, or really big small things in their lives, we discount them and ourselves by just saying, oh, it was easy for them. I really feel like if we were to take a good look at what people have achieved, again, whether big or small, public or private, if we could actually see what went into that, it would be really edifying for ourselves. And we would be able to give them better credit too for what they did to get there. Some people do get a big break. That is true, but they're very rare and they pay a price for it too. They pay a price.
I completely agree with that. I haven't met very many.
No, even the people who get the bigger breaks, I'm like, still, I can see that they're putting the hard work in. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, just in closing, what would you share with those recovering perfectionists? Just lean in and try to change that narrative a little bit, that script from being so focused on results and outcomes to instead being more flexible and pivoting and all of those things that you spoke to today. What's a small place that they could start?
It's a mindset of do something. Perfectionism is so all or nothing based. So instead of all, which comes at a cost, and instead of nothing, which are also paying a price for, we do something. Okay. And it's related to everything else we talked about. When you do something, you believe that the transformation lies in the process, not the outcome. You also believe that the small wins you create build over time. The small change leads to big change. You're believing yourself in a different way. You're allowing for room for failure, for pivoting, for curiosity. You make it less about you and also in the process form you. It's weird. Detach yourself and in the process you find yourself, you make yourself, which is pretty cool. So do something.
Very well said. I never really thought about it that way, but it's not that all or nothing, but very much just do something. And it doesn't have to be this rigid black and white approach, but that flexible approach that forms you in the process as you let go. It seems like every podcast episode I ever do, it all goes back to that letting go and just allowing it to be present, be flexible. So it seems like we're teaching that yet again today.
I love that. I love when there's recurring themes.
Thank you so much, Monica, for coming on. And where can we find you if you want to get to know a little bit more about what you do?
So primarily it's my podcast about progress. I'm also on Instagram at About Progress. And I would also invite them to take part in a training as I approach that 30th birthday. I did so through something we call in my community the Do Something list. And it's a way to explore who you are outside of goals and resolutions. It literally changes women's lives. I hear that all the time. It changed mine. That was the beginning. So to create their own Do Something list, they can go to aboutprogress.com/DSL and there's a free training for them.
Wonderful. And we'll put that in the show notes as well so they can check that out. And it was wonderful having you on and hearing your wisdom, your insights that speak so much to way more than we might know. So much of us relate to that perfectionism, that overachieving. And
yes,
it's helpful to hear some additional insights. So thanks again. And we'll have to have you on again soon.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to come back. Thanks so much, Kendra.
Thank you so much for listening today. As always, please head to our website, fulfillmenttherapy.org, to connect with us, as well as to get our weekly email list, which includes information about our new and current courses that we are offering. We hope to see you there. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here on every Monday and Thursday.